This podcast will talk you through the ups and downs in the entertainment industry.
Each and every one of you has a talent, but it's a tough business. People gonna tell you, get a real job.
By introducing you to sustainable, moldable methods in a crazy, cutthroat world.
Let us harness our willpower and take real action.
Don't let it get you down.
Join me, brothers and sisters, on a journey through trials and tribulations.
Unfake it till you make it.
Hello everyone, welcome to episode 17 of the Unfake It Till You Make It podcast. I'm Tony Suriano, and if you're new to this podcast, the format is usually like that of this. I interview professionals in the entertainment industry and I ask them all about their journeys and the insights that they've learned along the way. I do this because I am genuinely curious about other people's approach to their careers and personal life. I often test out their ideas or good habits to see if they can be adapted to my life and improve on all that. This is the essence of the love of wisdom to me. This episode is different because there will be no guest. Instead, I wanted to share a recent addition in my career. It has taken quite some time to finally relieve some career stress, and I wrote down a short antidote that I hope will be useful to anyone listening. My thesis statement is, you don't have to give up, but sometimes you must throw away your pawns in order to make your way to the kings and queens. My life is nothing new. So many before me have faced these relentless dreams of expressing to the truest form with a side of recognition. But even knowing this, I carried on because the feelings were so strong. I often walked through life as if days were movies, hours were scenes, minutes were montages, and moments were magic. I've never stopped feeling like this. When I first held a camera in my arms, I knew it was a miracle. My deep thoughts could be dumped out and finally stitched together. I remember the moment I told myself, I will make films for the rest of my life. I was 16 years old. I was fortunate to have a free film program at my high school and a fantastic film teacher. Hey, Kevin Kelly. That was the real reason I stayed in high school, because for those of you that know me, you know how I dreaded that, to borrow from the dollar vigilante, that indoctrination camp of a high school. I realized early on that I couldn't give in to following what we were taught to call the leader. Money was always tough to come by, and I would never ask for money from my parents except the one time I needed $10 to make sure my bank account didn't charge me an overdraft fee again. By the way, I got so many of those fees waived in the future, as well as removing any late fees for credit cards. Just be nice, and when they say no, I'm sorry, we cannot do that, just ask if you can talk to their manager, just in case there's a slight chance. Works every time. Just remind them how long you've been a customer, and since times are tough, you have been looking at other choices, but would hate to switch companies for a simple money issue. My statement here is, for years I got by making just enough money, but at my own terms, mostly. I did have to grab a few straight cut jobs here and there, but after 2 or 3 months, I would figure out another way to get by for another 6 months. It was a beautiful hell. What I mean by this is I would have all this free time to be creative while many of my peers were locked up in job positions they despised for years. But the hell part of it was the short, dense bursts of financial struggles. And yeah, that limited the social life a lot. But I kept pushing on and thinking about where I could be if I didn't give in. But it wasn't until the last few years that I realized I was chasing the field mice and not hunting the antelope like I should be. It takes the same amount of efforts. Now, what the antelope might be will be different for everyone, I'm sure. My antelope is creating and directing films that I'm proud to share. It's gaining enough wealth to start a library building project in places where people have no libraries. It's creating a mini animal kingdom in my future huge farmland property one day. It's being sure I'm constantly learning new and important things so I can be a better me and those around me can utilize my resources. But sometimes it takes a long, while to figure out that these little fast-moving things you're chasing are merely mice. And it did for me. The one moment I realized my antelope, it happened when I literally had no income for 4 months, but I had the same amount of bills to pay monthly. I could not seem to get any film gigs, and I was so stubborn to apply for any outside jobs because I felt like I'd be even more of a failure if I did. And that was a limited mindset, and I was wrong. At this point, I started asking everyone I knew or even met just once if they had any job opportunities in my industry. And I even started talking to production assistants that I never even worked with, but somehow grabbed their contact information and only met them once. By the way, it's always good to get people's info and log it in a way you'll never lose it, because that was one thing that saved me from possibly going bankrupt at the time. At that time, I finally budged my brain and got a valet job, and then before I even started, one of those blessed production assistants got back to me with a contact for a producer at MTV. I booked a 3-week camera PA gig for a reality TV show. I felt so much better, so much relief about it. But guess what? I told the valet company I still wanted to work, and I kept that job for 6 months. So I did both. After the MTV job finished, I just valeted and pretty much broke my threshold and associated so much pain to not having income that I bit the bullet and began working outside of the film industry. That was a big deal for me, and as a struggling artist, and even though it would seem logical to just get a job, it wasn't for me. It just was not logical in my head. I had to make earnings from my passions. And sometimes I'd tell myself I'd rather couch surf and camp around than get a job I despise, to then never be home at an apartment that costs way too much. But once I started the new job, I quickly reframed my mindset about its offerings. It ridded me of my basic worries, which freed my mind to draft out an important feature film script that I knew I had to write, but I couldn't make the time for because I was always worrying about how I would pay my next bill. And during those 6 months, I worked full-time and also landed a concierge position at a high-end place on the weekends and started Ubering here and there. At nights after work, I would write. During the day before work, I would write. I had to pull myself away from my chair to not be late for work eventually. I was so in the groove, and it felt great, and I realized that by having these external jobs at this time, it doesn't have to be forever, at these times, I was able to focus and put my head to the grindstone. So I finished quite a few drafts of my scripts with plans to produce it in the future, got back on my feet, and eventually I left those outside of the industry gigs and returned to hustling in the film industry yet again. But this time I had a little cushion and some boosted work ethic. The following year was a great one for my film company, but still a struggle. A struggle because getting new clients was just not my thing. I developed a few good ones by chance, but once we finished projects for them, that year, there was yet again a dead financial zone. So my key takeaway here is that I was chasing field mice just to get by, just to avoid jobs outside the industry because I thought they would deem me a failure, when in fact it was the opposite. But guess what? I really wanted to be writing and working towards feature films, not making little creations that never had enough budget or crew members. And it was because I freed up my financial worries with these external gigs at the time that I was able to focus on my antelope. And like any bad habit that convinces you wrongly, it was so easy to slide back into the old pattern. I wanted to start out running the show, be free with my time, to not be going the same direction as everyone else. And that can all be good, but it can also be ridiculously stressful and can cost you more than just having consistent income. So while trudging onward and doing half decent with my film gigs, a best friend and I created an Airbnb place from scratch to have another stream of income we both really needed. I do ask anyone to consider becoming an Airbnb host if you're a freelancer in any form, because it really takes the edge off if you do the research and become an effective and efficient host. And it's super fun. And yes, I said super. A quick rundown. No, we don't own the property. Shh. No, we didn't live in a place where we could Airbnb. At the time, I secretly lived in an office with no hot water, and my best friend secretly lived in a hidden room with no windows at an industrial business to keep both our overheads low. And what we did was rent an apartment in a desired area 1 block from the beach, and we put the whole deposit, first month's rent, and all the furnishings on my credit cards. It was a risk, but we believed in it, and under 2 months later, we paid back all the $6,000 we spent. We have a really cool projector in there and some other nice things, just extras. And we have been able to cash flow about $250 to $700 a month each ever since. And it's been about almost 2 years. And when guests are not there, we use the place as it is 1 block from the beach. It became another cushion and allowed me to focus on another antelope that would nourish me in the long run, traveling. For 9 months, I traveled to Asia and paid my way with credit card points and the cash flow from the Airbnb, as well as I subleased my office secretly. And guess what? With less worry, I was able to write another script I was dying to take care of for years, and it felt great. I was still nowhere close to the financial wealth I seeked, yet I had a 2-bedroom house on the beach for a good while in Asia while I was learning about other cultures and including them into my story. This brings me to my recent endeavor, realization I originally wanted to share with you guys and girls out there. I have been a paid freelance director, cameraman, and editor for the last 6 years, running through my production company, Oniris Films. It's been a really big, long struggle to earn a living solely from what I do, what I love to do. And there has been times in which, in between, where I had to take the super low-paying gigs, inside and outside of the industry. And along those times, I was enlightened to find that they actually stabilized me to the place where I could rechannel worry to a new focused endeavor that fulfilled me. Now, at this point, I have quite a few feature film scripts and treatments I'm proud of that need a little polishing before they can be produced. Why did I get so far to create them with beginning, middle, and end, with countless drafts, and not have them already shot, you ask? Well, yet again, the passion earnings of the business slowed down, thus some worry crept back in. But I did something new this time. I started the habit of counting how many times I reached out to potential clients and also how many applications I sent out for positions at other production companies. And at the same time, I partnered my production company, and together we pushed to gain new clients, the very thing I dread and am least experienced at. The partnership has really helped because we are sharing the driving forces and responsibilities, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity. Now, with a plan, I was able to throw out the worry and just keep taking action and keep submitting to what seemed to be pointless submissions and just counting and counting and counting. And at the same time, with this slow point in my business, I was also forced to leave my deal of the century dwelling space, that office I mentioned, to be faced with higher rent. I also was, and still am, taking on 2 large, exciting personal endeavors that cost more money than I'm used to handling. So I did the rounds every day with 2 months left to find a new place, and I raised my standards. I kept an open, opportunistic mind, and when I went sour about it, I jarred myself back into the groove again by losing track of time and continuing to learn more about how to change my physiology to get into a better mood. One thing I do is skateboard by myself with music in my ears. Sure, I'll skate with other people sometimes, but these days it's been by myself. And if you're listening, Brandon Estrada, come back to LA because you were my skating partner. But I literally lose track of time when I do this, and I come back refreshed and ready for action. Learning from what worked for me before, I decided I would commit to working at another production company full-time while continuing to run mine with my film partner on the side until things picked up immensely. Over 200 submissions later to people and production companies that didn't know me, I only had one lead, and that fell through. And guess what? Yet again, with the last of my moving funds, the time came and I had to move. After I moved in, I could probably pay 2 months of rent with no income, but after that I would be screwed. I kept on submitting, but I changed my approach because nothing was working, so I had to change the approach. So many ads out there in the industry are filled with low, insulting pay, especially for someone with a lot of experience. Okay, when I found an ad that sounded cool but offered that low pay, I responded immediately, but I crafted the response differently than I ever had before. I mentioned I'm intrigued, but then I offered to work 2 or 3 days for free to see if I'm a good fit under the condition they consider paying me X amount more or simply more than they were offering. I was surprised that quite a few gigs I really was interested in got back to me and asked me for an interview. And we're talking, again, over 200 plus submissions now, and after only a few of those altered pitches, and now I'm getting interviews. So it was pretty unique for me to do, and I was excited that it was happening, and I was impressed with the method and thinking how much more I could focus on the Antelope if I got consistent creative work at another production company. I accepted a phone interview, and I brought up the arrangement I offered toward the end of the call. They obliged, and I ended up directing and editing for their large YouTube channel for 3 free days. On the 4th day, we discussed pay and ended up settling on a 2-month probation period with a lot of time flexibility for my schedule, as long as I just met the deadlines they needed, which was great for me because that kind of reminded me most of my life, being a little more free with my time. And I'm really grateful that it went that way. And now I'm earning consistent funds. I'm excited and less worried to get back to the final stages of my Antelope projects, as well as taking more playful approaches to our production company and personal endeavors. Hitherto, that's really it. I just wanted to share my self-realizations with you guys out there, and who knows, maybe you can relate some way. But I really learned that it's okay to throw away some of your stubborn pawns and go for the bigger game, the long game. Hey, again, before you go, please let me know if you like this episode by leaving a comment on iTunes or wherever you're listening. I don't plan on doing many of these solo episodes, but if you liked it, I'll consider doing some more down the line. And I really thank you for listening, and I have some great interviews lined up, so stay tuned.
Thank you for listening to the Unfake It Till You Make It podcast. For detailed sources and show notes for this episode, visit www.unfakeittillyoumakeit.com. Until next time, get up, get going, and get creative.